What if I told you that the world you exist in is not real? That's a really terrible Morpheus. I'm sorry. I felt writing this just wasn't working. And I wanted to be able to ramble and edit. So I just saw Matrix Resurrections, and off the bat, yeah, I really liked it. I genuinely really loved it. But when I posted on Facebook that I was watching this, a couple of people, not naming, they didn't particularly seem to be fond of this. And that's fine. Off the bat, that is legitimate. You can not enjoy something, you're not forced to enjoy something, but I loved practically every moment of this film, and I can see why it might be very contentious. There is plenty of ways to read this film. Funny thing is, that was true of The Matrix too, and that's... I'll get into that in a tick. One thing I'll state here is I'm not going to talk about the trans analogy to the movie. Simply put, it's not my tale to tell. I have some understanding, not the broad, and there's going to be trans creators who have already studied the original Matrix and are probably going to be more useful to talk to about this. My background is on screen analysis, and I talk about movies, I know about production, I've written screens, I've directed stuff, acted a bit. I'm a creator, I'm a storyteller, so I really want to tackle it from this end. But I'm also someone who likes to keep up with especially political trends, especially the negative ones. I don't have the morbid fascination other creators do, but having more than a passive knowledge of some of the stuff, I think really helped informed some of the stuff for me in this film. Again, I see why people have critiques. So let's go to one of the first ones, because I think it's actually quite interesting.
This is future editing Simon, and I'd just like to reiterate that this section, or any of the critiques mentioned in this, is not directed to anyone who has posted on my personal Facebook account. So these are just general things I've seen online. So yeah, enjoy.
One of the common ones, people talking about how overdone, how can I put this? This movie really isn't that subtle. And I like that. The first Matrix movie, and more or less the sequels, the visual trilogy, was absolutely soaking in analogy. It was made during a time when things like transness and identity couldn't really talked about, and they had to use analogy to get this. It's this classic sci-fi trope, is actually talking about a message through a fictional reality like this. This is all the way through science fiction. So it's really hot in here, and I'm wearing, I can't really tell this, I've got the mic on. I'm not going to put the thing on because of sound. So I'm going to sweat through all this. Anyway, so in the original Matrix, it wasn't explicit. It was hinting at identity. The real world versus the fake world. It's steeped in these themes. It is a very thematic film. And it's also really easy to understand how some people can come away from The Matrix, like a lot of films, without understanding all of the depth and just think of it's a cool action film. Like, their mind blanks out the philosophical text of things like The Matrix. Again, watch movies how you want. But you're trying to say these things don't exist, you're flat out fooling yourself. I have been reviewing RoboCop, and that is layered. It's also satire. It's also full of these kind of themes: identity, humanity, everything. So to come away and say that a movie like The Matrix doesn't have any of that, you're wrong. Like, it's not even an opinion. You're just wrong. Fast forward to a couple of years ago. Movie Bob talks a bit about this in his breakdowns of Batman vs Superman, Dawn of fucking Justice, and how after the Harry Potter films had wrapped up, Warner Brothers didn't have a big franchise anymore. They're extending Harry Potter, but it's almost diminishing returns to a certain degree. Speaking of trends, especially all the situations surrounding J.K. Rowling and all the shit surrounding Johnny Depp as well. Not going to get into that. So it makes sense for Warner Brothers to turn around and go, we need to start sequelizing stuff. We need to franchising stuff. What's one of the biggest things we've ever had? What's things that's generated us so much money? The Matrix is one of those ones that you just go, no question. But you know Hollywood, they would have just rebooted this or remade it or something like that. So I think at the end of the day, Wachowski's basically had a choice. Either they make another film or they let someone else make another film. I don't know what these particular people want. I've tried to avoid a lot of this stuff because I just didn't want to spoil this film. But my take on it is that if Lily didn't want to be involved, that's fine. But I'm imagining those two had conversations for this last decade and a half. What would we do if we got the hands on our movie again? Because this was their movie. The first movie was their movie. The second felt corporate. And I think that layers into this movie particularly. So actually, let's just jump straight to the meta text of this movie. So the main plot of this movie is that the Matrix isn't real. Or at least the Matrix we observe in the first part of this movie isn't the Matrix we all know and love. The narrative is that Thomas Anderson created the Matrix as a video game. While it's successful, made a lot of money. Again, the metatext, the creator is also struggling. He's having mental episodes. He's being diagnosed as having delusions of believing, not being able to discern which is reality and which is the Matrix. It's also a video game, which is kind of brilliant to a certain degree. So the company is being tasked to make another game, The Matrix 4. This is where Anderson is starting to struggle with his day-to-day life, his reality, and it's starting to conjure images and worries. He has a therapist played by Doogie Howser, who's really cool in this. Because this is The Matrix, it is a soft reboot. And I think one of the biggest problems also is that it tends to re-go over a lot of the basic plots of the first movie, including the point where the introduction is almost faithfully recreated, but is somehow wrong. There's no Hugo Weaving as Smith. There's no Carrie-Anne Moss as Trinity. There's no Lawrence Fishburne. Oh no, Morpheus. Oh yeah, his voice is on the phone, but it replays the Trinity arrest scene in the beginning of the first movie, and things go wrong. But there's also another character by the name of Bugs. And yes, people go, Bugs Bunny. Yeah, that was deliberate. This is the part of this movie not being that subtle. But we've introduced this character called Bugs, who exists outside of the Matrix, presumably human. And as part of their first encounter, they meet an agent who kidnaps her and takes her into an unknown piece of code, which turns out to be based on Thomas Anderson's old apartment. This agent reveals themselves to be a digital copy of Morpheus. And they unlock Morpheus and bring it into the real world. It's the very first red pill, blue pill sequence in the movie, essentially. During this time, Neo has a crush on this girl in a coffee shop, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, by the name of Tiffany. It gets wildly complicated, but essentially, it all boils down to there's a great extended scene where the staff of this game company are talking about what is the Matrix. And they're going over a lot of legitimate analysis, the trans issues, civil rights, fascism, all these things. But the movie is like spitballing this, like, okay, so we've got to figure out what the original movie is so we can figure out what the next movie is, and blah, blah, blah. And I genuinely like that, because again, this movie's not being subtle. And I love that for it. I've got to keep reiterating this, because I've got a point. I'll get to the point. Eventually, Bugs tracks down Thomas Anderson in one of his low points. Oh yeah, and Thomas Anderson has been taking these blue pills throughout the entire time as antipsychotics. And eventually he reaches a point where it's established in the movie that this Thomas Anderson is suicidal because of the stuff that's going on in his head. And eventually Bugs finds him, and we start getting introduced to some of the new meta-narrative of the Matrix, or this Matrix. The humans are more capable than previously, where it was like, having to run to a dedicated phone line. I love that the meta-narrative now is like, there's pretty much no phone lines, so they have different ways of going in and out of the Matrix, and even going distances within the Matrix itself. They're basically able to skip space. We finally get to the red pill, blue pill scene. But this is where the movie starts going, you don't have a choice in this. It's something that starts to get reiterated. You do not have a choice. Thomas Anderson does not get offered the blue pill. He's only offered the red pill. And of course, things happen. He takes the red pills. We're introduced to the new monster, I guess you could probably call it, as opposed to just the agent. So now there's now this whole thing of multiple humans within the Matrix can now be controlled into a swarm to basically sacrifice themselves to try and attack the target. It is essentially the Burly Brawl without, like, a billion Agent Smiths. It's regular humans, which in it makes a lot of sense, especially for budget and time and less CGI. They do get, like, Matrix eyes. Eventually Thomas Anderson, now Neo, returns to the real world. I shouldn't say that. They basically do the rebirthing scene from the first movie again, where he wakes up in a pod. And again, very, very deja vu-ish. A lot of this movie questions what's happened. And it's at this point where, okay, pretty much all this is going to be spoilers, but Neo is returned to I can't believe it's not Zion. Is it Io? Into? I don't know. The new human city, and we find out that 60 years has actually passed since the original ceasefire. The peace is held. Humanity's been able to use technology a bit more. There's actually a synth-human alliance. Not all the Matrix synths from the Matrix wanted to stay in the Matrix, and not all the humans wanted to leave the Matrix. So the Matrix is still existing. Humans, that's actually one of the things at the end of the alliance with the humans and the synths is that any human that wants to leave is allowed to lead. They've still got to recruit them, though. And it turns out, like, how we had those rogue programs and that in the second and third movies, and characters like, say, Oracle, they are now allowed to exist outside of the Matrix to a certain degree in synthetic forms, or they are synthetic in nature themselves. Like, we are introduced to two Sentinel-ish type characters. They're like the birthing chambers. They're like, released Neo in the first movie and stuff like that. And so there's this kind of, the ceasefire is still existing, and now the arrival of Neo puts this all at stake. And Neo, when he escapes, he notices there's a pod next to him, opposite him, and it's Trinity. Well, we don't know if it's Trinity, but we know it's Trinity. And so his whole plot and desire is to rescue Trinity, and this is honestly the weaker half of the film. This is the Warner Brothers studio wanting to reinvigorate the Matrix so they can make 4, 5, 6, 7 bajillion more films. The Neo returning to the real world and having to go back into the Matrix and blah, de blah, de blah, de blah. So that essentially becomes the new goal, the next half of the film, and blah, 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 blah. So that's part of one of the themes. I'm not sure how much of this is legit. I'm not sure how much of this is baked in. But there is as part of the first one, identity, duality, this does go into a lot of the trans stuff and all that. Who are you, your dual character, dead names, other identities, how you see yourself. It's all laid bare in this one. What used to be subtext and what there was a lot of stuff they couldn't get away with. Infamously, the character of Switch in the first movie was supposed to be, I think, female in the real world and male in the Matrix. He got cut allegedly because they couldn't get the logistics down for it. Like, how do we explain this? I think it just could be things. But it was also a time when it was hard to get that stuff under the radar. And they already did get some stuff under the radar. Classically, estrogen at that time was a red pill. So again, undisputable those themes in there. The Wachowskis have actually... Wachowskis or Wachowskis? I'll say it wrong regardless. The Wachowskis have come out and said that, essentially when both of them publicly transitioned, that this was one of the themes of the original movie. But this does feel like, again, a dual-purpose movie. I think Lana set out to fix some of the issues of the sequels, did that, but also play with the narrative. I think having the entire extended sequence of Thomas Anderson in the real world and not knowing if the Matrix was going to be a thing. And the funny thing is, I would love an entire movie of that. Of him just questioning the Matrix and maybe at the end escaping. I would love to see like 90 minutes of just that entire narrative. But again, this is a corporate project. And so I think that's the problem, is that this movie really does. Well, I say the problem. That's the thing. This movie definitely does engage with that. How does these creators have to engage with a company that just wants a cash out? And let's face it, they would have hired anyone. They would have hired anyone to have made this movie. And I think that's part of the meta-narrative that surrounds this film is, how can we do something with this chance? And I think talking about the Matrix as this concept that it's outside of itself, like, what is the Matrix? How, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's probably a bit pretentious. It is probably a little bit self-indulgent, but I think that actually enhances this film. And I think it's the only way you could have done anything and made it new and relevant in this particular, especially in this particular era. And I fully understand why people won't like this movie, because of things like this. And I have to bring this up. But I also like that this movie is almost designed to piss off the right people. And when I mean the right people, I mean the right. Ignore the people. I mean, yeah, they deliberately piss off the right. For very good reasons. Firstly, these are typically the people that tend to ignore or flat out deny the themes of movies like The Matrix, especially ones that have queer-coded, trans-coded, or anything not beyond the regular cis white male hoo-ha bullshit. They deliberately have a blue-haired girl who's kind of transy, like very non-binary energy. I love that. She doesn't have a love interest, she's not sexualized or anything like that. She's fairly cute. She actually reminds me of the I think it's the trans actress in Star Trek Discovery Season 3 who plays the Trill former host of the NB new character. The hair and everything reminds me of that. She's also an empowered female. She's the captain of her crew. And it's on the nose. She's named Bugs. And they even go, Bugs Bunny, follow the rabbit. She's got a rabbit tattoo. It's no longer trying to be subtle. Morpheus is, spoilers, the Morpheus program is more of a meshing of Morpheus and Agent Smith. So it's almost weird how he's supposed to be Morpheus, but he's also got a bit of charisma. It's not, that's not saying Lawrence Fishburne isn't charismatic or anything, but it's like they ramp up a bit of the camp, and I love it. Tiffany's husband is called Chad. Oh my god, I love this film. And anyone who's actually looked into these kind of spaces, or looked into videos about these spaces and all this type of stuff, it really is them pretty much poking the bear at the men's rights activist sphere, the manosphere, the alt-right. They've almost deliberately put in everything that they hate into this film. This movie explicitly turns around to these idiots and says, this movie is not for you, fuck off. Love it. And I love all the meta-narrative. I love the idea of this creator looking back at their work and re-exploring especially the themes that have been subverted, or at least flat out stolen and recontextualized by absolute fucking monsters, as well as the alt-right. The Red Pill itself becoming this bastardized version of what they were trying to say. And yes, it's all about, what is the real world? But the alt-right and the right-leaning people have used that concept of what is the real world. This has led to the existence of things like QAnon and all this other stuff, and a lot of really toxic behavior. And because they want to look at these progressive ideals like trans rights, gay marriage, banning conversion therapy, access to health, dare I say the dreaded socialism, things like that, and how that's not the real world. The real world is this, ultra masculine, right-wing truth that only they have. That's the real world, and you need to take the red pill. So I truly appreciate that they've basically made a movie that says, no, fuck you, you're wrong, and here's why. Here's the creators of this movie flat out telling you that this movie, this series, is not for you. And if you don't like it, you can go and watch something else. Please let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. I can see why people don't like this, and I thoroughly enjoyed everything. I love the cinematography, I love the direction, I love the action sequences. I had a smile on my face from beginning to the end. I loved everything. Even when it was just like, oh my god, they just recreated the first movie right at the beginning. But I realized that I should just trust my faith in these directors. I mean, yeah, some of the shit that they've done in the last few years has not been great. I haven't explored everything, but I gotta trust these people. And I wasn't disappointed. I really enjoyed this, and I think that's the thing. This movie's not for everyone. But if you love cinema, you'll really love this film. If you love meta-textual knowledge, you'll love this film. If you like to a certain degree, you can switch off your brain and just enjoy the great action film. You can watch this. If you go into this with preconceptions, you're probably going to have a bad time. If you go into this thinking that the first Matrix movie is just a dumb action film that doesn't say anything, you're especially going to have a bad time. If you don't like it, that's fine. More power to you. Let me enjoy it. Because I really did. I really enjoyed the hell out of this. I might actually go back and watch those sequels. I literally have the box set over there from the original DVDs. I've been contemplating if I want to bother getting it on Blu-ray or 4K or something like HD or something like that. And part of me's always been a bit... And one of the things in this movie is they recycle a lot of the old footage as part of the meta-narrative. And it's really cool. It's really nice to see some of these old characters come back. And god damn it, Carrie-Anne Moss needs to be in more movies again. God damn, she's good in this. The only thing... one thing I didn't like, I don't like Jada Pinkett Smith. I don't think she's a good actress, and never liked her in the original sequels. She's one of the only few returning actors in this movie. And they put her in old person makeup, and it's not good. But young person and old person makeup never works. It just doesn't work. One thing I do love, and I haven't double checked on this, but I don't want to double check personally, but when they see documentation of the Matrix 4 within the thing, they have an icon at the top and it's a bullet, and it looks exactly like the Remedy logo, with like, but it's like Matrix-y to a certain degree. But like the shape of the bullet and size and everything, it looks like Remedy. And I was like, is that an in joke to Remedy, who basically made the first and honestly only good Matrix game. Even though it wasn't called Matrix, it was called Max Payne. And this is someone who actually owns copies of it in the Matrix. Oh. Yeah, I'm out. I'm tired. It's hot. I'm sweaty, and I've got everything I think I wanted to say out of here. Yeah, I enjoyed the fuck out of it. I want to watch it again. I wanted to watch it again as soon as I left the cinemas, but there's a ton of movies I haven't got around to seeing yet. So until next time, see ya.